everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to share with you recessed framing and card making. Now I have 3 different examples for you today. I understand this is a longer video, so if you just want to watch the recessed framing portion, not the rest of the cards, I will leave timestamps down below in the description box to the start of each card or to the point in each card where I show the actual recessed framing technique. So for this first card, I am using the Get Well Wishes stamp set from Joy Clair Stamps. I have an A2 size card base and 2 A2 size white cardstock panels. I'm also using 2 rectangle dies. Now I'm just using rectangle dies here. The same technique can be used with stars, with circles, with triangles. Whatever die you want to use, you can do this technique with. You just want to create little window openings with your die. So I'm starting off with my largest rectangle on one of the cardstock panels. I will run that through my die cutting machine. Now I'm going to put that over the top of my next panel to line up exactly where I want my second die cut. That is the second die or the second A2 sized panel you see underneath the one I die cut before. I'll inlay that die, remove the top panel. I don't want to send it through my die cutting machine again, and I'll run this die through my die cutting machine as well. Now there I have 2 different sized frames, one a little bit larger than the other one, and then I have my card base underneath that. And that's essentially the frames that I'll be using today. There are a few different ways that I will be loading them up onto my card base, and a few different ways or a few different techniques I'll be doing on each one to make them a little bit different. So for my first card, with my frames done, I'm going to put my card base into the MISTI. This is where I'll be doing all of my stamping on the card base. I have the little 2 cats that are hanging on that line. I overlaid my smallest frame to make sure everything was centered nice and well, and then I'll pick up that stamp with the lid of my MISTI. I'm stamping today with some Memento ink because I will be using my alcohol markers to color these in. Now this is a brand new stamp. I've never used it before, and this is a larger one. So I'll be stamping it a few times. I'll press down, give it a good press, and then I'll ink it up again just to get a very nice dark impression. And once that is done, I can move on to my next stamping. Now I want to do some masking with this stamp, just a very tiny bit, so I'm not doing any crazy masking here. So I just want to stamp this onto a post-it note while it's still loaded onto my MISTI. I just need those top 2 little arms, so I'll just ink that up and stamp it down. Now in this set, there are also some great little clouds that you can stamp around your images. There are 3 different ones, and I've got them loaded up onto acrylic blocks. Using that same Memento ink, I'm just going to stamp them here and there. Also in this set, there are these little cluster of birds. I'm going to stamp them with the same black dye ink. I'll stamp them once in the top left-hand corner, and then also off to the right-hand side as well, right above that cloud. This is a great set to make a quick little scene. You could just use this as a scene on a card, maybe add a frame around it, color it in, and you've got a card ready to go. You don't need to go to all this extra work, but I wanted to share this technique with you. I masked off those 2 little arms on the cats that are hanging onto that line, and also the little bird, and I am going in with some Salty Ocean Distressing to color in my sky. I have also masked off the outside of that card base just so I don't get any ink. It shouldn't show through in the end, but just in case one of my layers is a little bit off, I didn't want to take that chance, so I just masked it off very quickly. Now I went ahead and used kind of an ombre effect, darker on the outside, went a little bit lighter towards the center, just to kind of highlight those little cats. Also, my little line is not going to be all the way out to the frame, so I grabbed my micron pen, any black pen or marker will do, and I just filled in that line so it will go all the way to the edges of the frame, so it doesn't look like the line is hanging there in midair. I'll remove that painter's tape, and then I've got this great little rectangle scene that is now colored in with the sky. For my coloring on my cats, like I said, I am doing some very quick alcohol marker coloring. Now I went ahead and just separated these so I could smear outside the lines if I wanted to. I'll be fussy cutting these, so it's not a huge deal. And on this first one, I'm going to make him a little bit of a Garfield cat, a little orange, a little yellow. I started with my darkest color on the very outside, and I'm going lighter as I go towards the center. I added a little bit of shadow right underneath his arm and a little bit on the very top of his tail. Now, I am no expert colorer at all, so this is very quick and simple and easy to do. Some dark browns on the spots, and then I'm going to go with a very light ivory tan color for the body itself. Now, I also brought in just a little bit of very, very pale light yellow to give a little bit more color and add a little bit more shading. But other than that, I'm going to keep this pretty simple. And this, I'm going to be making my little girl cat too. So I grabbed a very light shade of pink, added a little bit to the cheeks, just 2 little dots, and then I blend it out with my lightest colored marker. I like to do that on a lot of my critter stamps just to give it a little bit more color. And also for my little flowers, I want to color them in with a dark purple. I will be doing the centers of those with enamel accents, so I'm not worried about that. Now, I went ahead and fussy cut those out, and I did go over all the cut lines with my black alcohol marker. That just gives it a nice finished look. And on the actual card base itself, I'm going to come in, I don't want to go too crazy with these colors and have it bleed in through the inside of the card. So I kept this very light and colored in the arms very quickly with a few alcohol markers that I used on the cats themselves. I will be attaching the fussy cut cats over the ones on the card base and pop them up a little bit for more interest, but just in case any of those stamped cats underneath peek out the side, I'm going to take my alcohol markers, the darkest color that I used, and color in just along the outside of those cats. Again, very light layer of color. I don't want it to bleed through, but I need to give it that color in case it peeks out a little bit. Now, this stamp set has some great building sentiments in it. It's going to be used so much more than just for get well. It has a hang in there. It has sending a little sunshine your way. A lot of different building sort of sentiments in there. So you can use it for maybe a friend or a relative that just needs a little pick-me-up, is going through a tough time. I love this, that it's just not get well. It's got those other sentiments in there. So I use the hang in there right along the bottom of that top frame with the largest cutout. For this particular card, I'm going to be popping up both layers with dimensional adhesive. I like to use fun foam and double-sided adhesive because that's what works best for me. I work in a very, very, very tiny craft space. So the less product I have to keep on hand, the better. I use fun foam for a lot of other things, and I have my regular adhesive, so that's just what I use, but use whatever works for you. I went ahead and lined up that first frame, put it down, and then my second frame, again, I put some fun foam and double-sided adhesive on the back of it, and I will be popping this one up as well. I want to mention too, you'll see in the top right hand corner, I have that little sun that I also stamped out, colored in with my alcohol markers, and fussy cut too. I'll be using it on my card. It's from the same stamp set that I used. I just didn't show the coloring in of that. This video is already long enough. I went ahead and put down that top frame, lined it up, and next up is going to come those little cats. I put some more dimensional adhesive on the back of them, popped them over the top of their stamped images on the card base, and there they've got that little bit of dimensional adhesive, but their arms holding on are behind. It's so cute. I love it. Now for the sun, I cut it at a right angle on the right hand side, and I'm going to pop that into the top right hand corner so it's even with that top frame for a little bit more dimension and interest. At some point during the making of this card, I got to smudge in a black ink right at that top, at the very top on that frame. I just take my sanding block, you can use a sanding eraser, whatever you have, just go over that until it's gone. That way you don't have to toss out your entire card. But I added a little bit of black enamel accents to those flowers. I added a little bit of green Nuvo drops to that little bird in the top right hand corner, and that finished off that card completely. I absolutely love the dimension in this one. Love the way it turned out. It's so cute. And there's a closer look at those added embellishments that I added to the flowers and bird, just to give you a better idea of really just how much they add to that simple card. For my next card, I will be using an A2 top folding white card base, an A2 white cardstock panel, and an A2 craft cardstock panel. Now I will be starting off with my white cardstock panel. This is going to be my top frame, which needs the largest cutout in it. So I've put my rectangle die in there, ran that through my die cutting machine, and then I'll go in with a 2 sizes down nesting in my nesting set rectangle, so it's very much smaller, and I'll cut out the center of my craft panel. Now I went for a very much smaller opening in these because the focal point of my card is going to be smaller in this one. Now you'll see what I do to kind of fill in that space, because this is a very simple card and it's not going to have any dimension on it whatsoever, excuse me. But before I even start any of that, I want to add a little bit of interest to that top frame. I'll be using the Valentine Background Builder. I use this in my challenge card for this month for Joy Clair Stamps. If you haven't checked out the Joy Clair Stamps challenge, I will leave a link to that video in the top right hand corner. Be sure you do, because it is a great challenge to play along with. There is a great prize to win. And the rules are very simple, and just make sure you go check it out. So I am starting off with this Scripty Love builder in there, and this fits together just perfectly. I'll give you a close-up once I stamp this second one. I stamped it first. This is red, I believe, Ladybug dye ink from Memento. I stamped that down once, then lined it up a second time, and it creates this perfect little heart that you can just continually stamp. Make it as long as you want, make it as short as you want. It's up to you. Now to give this a little bit more interest, I'll be flipping this over and stamping it upside down on my next row. Then I'll flip it back over and do it the right way on my next row. Now I went ahead and did my die cutting first on this one just because I didn't have a lot of craft time on this particular day. So I cut out the middle to make my stamping go a little bit faster. But if you're not comfortable with that and it helps you line things up, leave that center portion in there. Create your background first, then go in and do your die cutting. It is a little bit easier that way, but like I said, when you're short on time, you do what you got to do. Now, also when stamping this, I made sure to shift it a little bit to the left or the right each time I stamped it, so it looked a little bit different and it wasn't sitting exactly on top of each other the same. And that's going to help it give it a better look, almost like you're die cutting a pattern paper that you might have bought at the store instead of one that you've made yourself. I'm on my last line here. Once I go up to the very top, this one is going to hang off a little bit, and that's okay. It gives the appearance more of a pattern paper, but once that was done, there's a closer look at that frame all ready to go on my card. Now for my craft frame, I'm actually going to run this through my die cutting machine with an embossing folder and kind of give it almost it looks like a waffle cone to me, to be honest. Maybe I just like ice cream too much, but that's what it looks like to me, and I love it. For the sentiment on this card, I will be using a sentiment from the Love Scripture stamp set from Joy Clair Stamps. This is from the Color by Faith series, and it is actually for Bible journaling, but I like to use these on my cards too. These are great, especially if you love Bible journaling, but also if you make cards for your church, or if you send them to church members that you know. They're just a great thing to have on hand. For the sentiment, I am stamping it in rich cocoa ink. I lined it up through that smallest frame like you've seen before. That way I know everything is placed exactly where it needs to be. And I am stamping the Love Never Fails right in the center on my card base itself. I stamped that 3 times to get the darkness of ink that I wanted. And now it's time to put this card together. Now this one is more than likely going to go through the mail, so I want it to be nice and flat. I'm not adding any extra dimension. I'm putting everything down with double-sided adhesive. So I've got my first frame, my waffle cone frame. I attached the pattern paper frame that I made right over the top of that. Now this one, like I said, is very flat. It's going to go through the mail beautifully, but it doesn't lose any of that extra oomph that it needs because I put that pattern over the top of it. I added that dry embossing to the center, and it just it turned out very nice too without the added dimension. As I took the frame size down to fit that sentiment, it helps to really highlight it right in the center. Now on my third and final card, I will be using two stamp sets from Joy Clair. The one on the left, it's called Call on the Lord, and it is from the Color by Face series. And then the one on the right is called Hello Sentiments. It's one of my favorites. I've used it so many times. For my panels, I've got a white cardstock panel, a black cardstock panel, and an A2 size white top folding card base. Now my white frame is going to be on the top, so I am running the largest die through with it, and then my smaller die I'll be running through with my black card panel. Now again, this just shows you can use whatever color cardstock you want to match your card. You can add some dry embossing to it. You can stamp like a pattern paper. You can use pattern paper if you want to. You could use foiled cardstock, like the Renia foil would be beautiful with this technique. It really is up to you. Different shapes. It's just a really versatile technique, especially if you're making a very simple card like a lot of these are, and you want that little bit of extra something to add and kind of frame it out. So to start off with, I went ahead and stamped out the very top, kind of the holding part of the phone. I can't remember what they're called. We had telephones when I was a child, and we had one all when I was growing up and all that, but now we don't even have a home phone anymore. I'm not sure what that's called. I think it's the receiver. That's what I'm going to call it. So I stamped that down, colored it in with some black soot distress ink, and then fussy cut it out. Now I went ahead and framed that up in my MISTI, so I knew exactly where I needed to stamp my hello sentiment. And this is another one of those stamp sets that's great for Bible journaling. I can't wait to use it for that. But it also works for so many other things. Like here I'm using it for hello card. I can also grab those little cell phones that are in that set, stamp them, make a beautiful background with them in some very vibrant colors, and they make a great teenage birthday card. I mean, there's so many different things to do with these sets. I stamped a few of those lines that makes it look like sound is coming out of there. I realize now that it wouldn't be coming out of both ends, but you know, I stamped it anyway. On the back of that, I added some fun foam, and I'm using baker's twine right on the back of that to make the line of it. I'll be using the frame's adhesive to actually hold that in place. I did put a little bit of adhesive just to hold it down and make it nice and straight up and down. That way it looks like it's hanging from the top of the frame. I'd already attached my white frame over my black frame with double-sided adhesive, no dimension, but then on my black frame I popped it up with a little bit of adhesive, added some black enamel accents around there, and that card was finished. There, that gives you a better definition of what is popped up and what isn't on this card. And there's a closer look at that very center of the finished card and the receiver itself hanging down. A final look at all three cards just to show you all the different variations of this technique. You've got the waffle cone card with the very small center with just the sentiment in it. I've got this great scene with both frames popped up, and that last hello card with the little receiver hanging down and just a white and black frame. Very simple and easy to do. That does it for me today. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so very much for watching. You'll see a few different links on the left-hand side you can click on. Happy crafting, everyone.